Started now. Welcome everyone. My name's Harry Saville, and I'm a Managing Consultant Psychologist here at CiC. So welcome to our webinar looking at creating a neuro-inclusive workplace. As I said, we do a lot of interactions in the chat today, maybe ask you some questions and kind of getting your input on what you think about certain topics in this area. So please feel free to always use the chat to introduce yourselves if you want to, or where you're based, or also your input on some of these talking points. I've said a lot of these webinars that it's useful just to hear your input, what you're doing in your organization, what you think will be helpful. You might really resonate with someone else, a different organization. About what neurodiversity is to start with, just to bring everyone on the same page. Some of you might have seen this slide from previous webinars, but just to get everyone up to speed. So neurodiversity is a term that refers to the natural variation in human brain function and embraces that people have different ways of thinking, learning, and processing information. So it highlights that people naturally think about things differently, basically. So we always think about this as in we're all unique, and we all sit within this complex spectrum of different strengths and challenges. So I always say I always love this this image on this slide, looking at the different brains and how we might all think in different ways, more process driven, maybe sort of better with numbers, maybe sort of some better problem solving, some people more visual, some people seeing the big picture, some people seeing nuances and situations. But it all helps with if you put that all together in an organization, it can add a lot of value. Is what we're looking at today. So the neurodiversity umbrella. So it's also used as an umbrella term, this term neurodiversity, for some common learning differences and diagnoses that you may have heard of. So we won't go through these in too much detail today. We'll just talk about the strengths and the value added. So we'll cover some diagnoses such as dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, ADHD, autism, Tourette's. So as I said, not an exhaustive list. It's always evolving. Just some of the most common diagnoses you may see. Some of you might have heard of some of these as well. Key messages from these, as I always say, two people with the same diagnosis may present different challenges. There's a wide spectrum of different characteristics might be associated with a particular diagnosis. So bearing that in mind, two people might have the same label, doesn't mean they have the same traits or strengths or challenges, and that can also depend on the role they're in as well, the situation they're in. Think about a lot of the challenges that I've often seen, often due to maybe the environment someone's in, the ability to have adjustments, or the role changing around them as well. Also, people may have dual diagnosis or multiple diagnoses. You can see people with maybe dyslexia and ADHD, or autism and ADHD. That all feeds into how that presents for the individual in terms of their characteristics. So key message, we all sit within there, even with the people with the same diagnosis. Always useful to treat each individual as an individual. Don't make assumptions about what they may need. So what we'll cover today, and talk about why neuro-inclusion is important. I think already from those introductory slides, you can start to think about the value there and why it's important, and why we're talking about it. The value to organization, so talking about kind of what the impact is of not being neuro-inclusive, but also the value of being neuro-inclusive and why we're setting that out today. The barriers to neuro-inclusive workplaces. I'll cover some areas that I've frequently seen, but it'd be good to hear kind of if anyone here is neurodivergent, what your barriers have been, as kind of any leaders here or anyone involved in strategies, thinking about what barriers they've had in creating neuro-inclusive workspaces. It'd be great to hear kind of your input there as well. And lastly, thinking about what we can do to build that neuro-inclusivity. Some tips that I've picked up along the way. It'd be good to hear kind of what you found helpful as well, or anyone here who is neuro-inclusive, who is neurodivergent, kind of what they found helpful. It'd be great to hear what kind of really resonates with you. As I said, be as interactive as possible throughout today, so please feel free to add your thoughts in the chat. We'll keep coming to those as we have discussions throughout today. So let me go on to the next point now. So on that note, we're looking at neuro-inclusivity. What does neuro-inclusivity mean to you? If anyone's willing to share their thoughts, what does that mean to you? What does that entail? Mentioned here, so yeah, everyone can get involved. Yeah, so that's everyone's that kind of that inclusion, isn't it? And being involved in everything, no one feels left out. Just being free to unmask and be yourself at work. Excellent point. If anyone's unsure what the word kind of masking means, that's something that will come up a lot today. So thank you, whoever's shared that. Yeah, the idea of unmasking, being your true self in the workspace. I feel like that's something, I know we talk about neurodiversity today, inclusivity, something that kind of transcends that. It's bigger than just neurodiversity, isn't it? It's helping everyone to be their true selves is really important. Yeah, embracing everyone. Learning in different ways. Yeah, it's kind of how we, knowing that people process information in different ways. How do we allow people to do that in the workspace? Yeah, learning in different ways, or learning that other people learn in different ways, and how do we present things in different ways? Knowing that someone can act a certain way and not be rude intentionally. That's a really good point. Something I've heard a lot of in with previous clients and previous work roles, kind of whether we met certain people who are neurodivergent and they might communicate in a different way, understanding the intention behind it, and then having those meetings to kind of really understand how to communicate better together. Meeting everybody where they are at. Yeah, kind of meeting in the middle, to be included, accepted, no matter what our individual differences. Yeah, so kind of not having a one size fits all, really kind of understanding that we're all different and kind of embracing that, valuing differences, really important. Yeah, so that's a really good point. When we talk about how we create neuro-inclusivity, thinking about how we value differences, how do we communicate that as well? So in the organisation. Education, involvement across all areas. Yep, it's not just one department's role; it's for everyone. Workplace accommodations really important. I feel like we could do an entire session on adjustments. Maybe that's something for the future. Yeah, those kind of workplace accommodations. What can we actually do in different settings? Providing the environmental support required. Yeah, all the really good points. I'll come back to all these when we're talking about what we can actually do later. So I'll put the definition on the page as well while we're talking. So this is from a report from CIPD in 2024. So mentioned recognizing that the neurodiversity of your team and taking steps to embrace and leverage different types of information processing, learning, and communication styles. So there's a lot about what a lot of you have mentioned today. It's that idea of accepting and understanding people think differently, communicate differently, process differently. So a mixture of that awareness, understanding, but also how do we value that and really champion it in our organisation? Yeah, people have mentioned, kept going, like embracing those differences, accepting differences. The setting is accommodating. Yeah, yeah. I won't say too much now. I'll come back to that in a bit. Someone's mentioned here, so neuro-inclusivity benefits all workers. Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about that in the benefits in a bit as well. So I've mentioned, yeah, we'd like to learn more about adjustments. Yeah, I feel that might be something for us to work on in the future, definitely. So another question now. Why is neuro-inclusion important? What's brought you here today? It's a good question, I suppose. Why is it important to you? A lot of you have spoken about kind of some of what it involves, but what's the value there? What does that bring to your organisation? It's a changing world, new generations. Yeah, so kind of maybe that more awareness around neurodiversity as well. So we need to evolve and learn more about it. Getting the best out of everyone. Yeah, it's if we're all made to work the same way, it may not suit all of us. We have different ways of working, different strengths. Absolutely just helps, as someone mentioned before, it benefits all of us, not just the neurodiverse people, people who identify as being neurotypical as well. Absolutely. Ensure that everyone is treated the same way. Yeah, I've got a point on that later, thinking about kind of the difference between equality and equity. Just thinking about how do we ensure everyone has what they need, treating, understanding everyone's different. So yeah, kind of giving everyone, I guess, uniformly, making sure giving everyone what they need. Yeah, ensuring the longevity in the workplace. Yeah, I've definitely got points on those later. That retention, best results for the business, exactly utilizing those strengths. Yeah, on that point, creating equity among staff. Yeah, absolutely. If anyone's not sure of the difference, have a look now if you want, but I'll talk about that later as well, between equality and equity. Improving performance, leveling out effort requirements of being at work for different people with different needs. Yeah, absolutely. Kind of, we're helping them feel like they're not fighting against the grain or swimming upstream with the way they're working, helping them feel better at work, helping them be more productive. Definitely valuable for all of us. Everyone deserves to feel safe at work. So the idea of psychological safety, absolutely. Encourages open-mindedness, evolution in the workplace, understanding others. Yeah, absolutely. Lots of really good benefits here. Someone mentioned that right at the end here. So absolutely all of the above. I have often felt like I can't do my job the way they want or need me to do, as I'm not neurotypical. And the onslaught of online and digital methods since COVID has made my poor brain explode. Yeah, I'm sorry, that must be really difficult. Yeah, it reminds me of a blog I was writing during COVID for that exact moment, that kind of idea of all the differences that have happened in the last couple of years, people's coping strategies changing, and how that affects our well-being as well. So yeah, that kind of helpless feeling sometimes. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really helpful. And I'm sure there's a lot of people here who relate to that. So thank you. Um, Having neurodivergent members has a financial benefit for the company. Absolutely, I'd love to see some figures on that if anyone's got any. I'll read this last one and we'll keep moving. So everyone experiences ADHD differently, but some helpful adjustments I found for ADHD include having someone to proofread important work for silly errors, setting clear deadlines, scheduling focus time. Yeah, I think that's a really good one. Being able to work in a quiet room with headphones, playing white noise music to minimize distractions, short breaks, flexible hours to maximize work and productive times. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing those. Again, perfect example why it's useful to keep sharing in the chat. You never know who might pop out and help you. So, and a lot of those recommendations you've mentioned there, I'm sure people who identify as being neurotypical in this call, a lot of those might find them really helpful. So thank you as ever shared that. It's really helpful. Um, yeah, I think it's really helpful just to keep, because we have those adjustments in place. You never know who might come out and come to you and say, actually, I find that really helpful too. So you never know. So I'll keep moving. A really key point is what I usually open up with is the actual percentages of people who are neurodivergent. So this is from research from Nancy Doyle from 2020. So I believe it's based on people who have a particular diagnosis. So it's around 15 to 20% of the population. But even in my time of doing this kind of work, working in neurodiversity, having done so for about 8 years now, that's changed as well. It started off being very much like 1 in 7, 15%. That's gone up to sort of 20. In particular industries as well, people see it's kind of a higher percentage as well. Obviously, we're seeing different skill sets in different areas. You're going to gravitate to certain strengths, aren't you? So that number is always growing. And yeah, not everyone is diagnosed. Someone's mentioned in the chat there. So you could say a reason why this number could be a lot higher. So so this is someone mentioned in the chat, it's a global population. I believe it's global, but it depends on the awareness in the area as well, because that number can change depending. If you look at local figures, it can be different. I can double check that afterwards as well, but I believe it's global. Yeah, I think already in the chat, you're already starting to think about how that number could be larger. Think about the growing awareness. Not everyone's diagnosed. People getting diagnosis later in life because that language wasn't there when they were growing up. There's stigma attached to diagnosis still, which also feeds into that difficulty with creating neuro-inclusivity, the lack of awareness. People are associating kind of neurodiversity with that kind of disability model, the negatives, the challenges, and looking at people as being less able. So people feel uncomfortable maybe disclosing diagnosis or going for a diagnosis. So the amount of times I've been in training sessions where, you go through the awareness of different diagnosis and people say, oh, this sounds like me, or this sounds like my parents and my children, and they notice it in themselves. So something to think about in terms of creating that neuro-inclusivity. Growing awareness can really help. How do we grow that awareness in our teams to help them identify that and remove that stigma around neurodiversity? But my key point on this, actually, before I forget, is really around it's a large number already. If it's 20%, we're all saying could be much higher. If you think about the people you work with, about 20% of the people you're working with. If you don't see 20% of the people you work with being neurodivergent, why is that? Do they feel uncomfortable sharing the neurodivergent? That masking, we spoke about this, someone mentioned in the chat before. So hiding those differences, not sharing, not feeling psychologically safe to talk about it. Might also be recruitment. How are we approaching neurodivergent in neurodiversity in recruitment as well? So lots of things to think about, and gives you the reason why it's really important to become neuro-inclusive as an employer. There's also employer responsibilities. So it's really important. So although many neurodivergent individuals do not see their neurodifferences as a disability, something we spoke about a lot in our sessions at CiC. So even last month we had Neurodiversity Celebration Week, really championing and talking about all the value added of all those skill sets for different diagnosis within neurodiversity. So although many neurodivergent individuals do not see themselves as, or their neurodifference as a disability, it is still a protected characteristic under the Equality Act in the UK, but also differing acts in different countries. A key thing, especially with UK based, is you do not require a diagnosis to access support. So it could often be a assumption I hear as from managers saying, oh, I can't support them. They need to get a diagnosis first before I can offer those adjustments. Definitely not the case. So you can definitely start having those adjustment processes or those adjustment conversations regardless of diagnosis. And I think it's something a lot of employers I've seen in the last recent years moving towards as well, not feeling like a diagnosis is necessary, more just approaching it as it's our role as employers to support our teams. As we mentioned in the chat before, idea of equity, are we giving each individual what they need? So I think it's a useful way of approaching it as an employer as well, and makes it a bit less complicated in knowing when to jump in. Yeah, so I've mentioned the chat here. So first, I think we need to be careful with phrases like, I think, on the spectrum. Some neurodivergent people face very real challenges and feel those who are not well understood. I'll minimize by saying everyone's on the spectrum. Yeah, there is, like, I think to that comment, yeah, there can be lots of people having very kind of difficult situations when they are neurodivergent. Absolutely. It is different experiences for sure. So I've mentioned here in reference to what we're talking about. Yes, I was told that, but you're not diagnosed. Yeah, so very disheartening. It can really throw you back, can't it? Think like, do I need to do that first? Really, it's not the case. So any leaders here, any managers feel like it's just building it into your adjustment process, and it's almost just people management processes, really. Kind of how do we, as managers, how do we encourage our managers to look after their teams and adapt their staff to different individuals' needs? So some stats here I'll talk through. So 30% of this is from the Neurodiversity Index, so from this year. So 30% of organisations have been involved in employment tribunals related to neurodiversity. So it's definitely increasing. There's some stats I saw a couple of years ago saying that it almost tripled the amount of times they saw, in a particular law firm, the amount of times they see those cases due to neurodiversity. And that could be because of growing awareness of what people know they can, the adjustments that are there. In the past, that wasn't there. 33% of employees were not satisfied with the current support they're receiving from their employer. So of that 20% of neurodivergent individuals in your teams. A lot of them may be unhappy with the support they're getting. And 51% of employees say they have taken time off work because of their neurodivergence, which is something really important. The link between neurodiversity and mental health. It's something we've spoken about in previous webinars. If anyone wants to look at the neurodiversity and mental health webinar we did a couple of months ago, it's available online as well. You know, they're different conversations, but we often see that link between neurodiversity and mental health because of the environment people are in and the support they have available. So taking that time off work because of that masking the challenges they're experiencing. And only 34% of employees say they felt well supported in their workplace. As you can see, there's a lot more work that needs to be done. So yeah, it comes back to that argument I was saying before around equality over equity. So it's the responsibility of employers to offer adjustments to support employees in their role. We can't treat everyone the same. So the argument I might sometimes hear is, well, we can't do that for one person because then everyone's going to want that as well. But it's thinking we can't treat everyone exactly the same. You know, we all have different needs or different ways of thinking. It's about being able to adapt to each of our individual needs is really the way of looking at it. And linking in that idea as well with that from the mental health side, when people are struggling and they are, you know, they're experiencing challenges in the workplace, why are they masking? So masking, a term that a few of you have mentioned in the chat already, that ability to feel like you can unmask and feel comfortable being yourself. That's where people, when they're in environments where they don't feel like they are psychologically safe, they're worried about how they're going to be treated. Maybe there's stigma around diagnosis within the organisation. They're worried about being seen as less able or discriminated against. And there's some good stats here from the Neurodiversity and Business Report in 2023. So they found that 65% of neurodivergent employees feared discrimination from management, 55% the same from colleagues. So there's a lot of people there masking, and it's something that I've frequently seen, even when I've done workplace needs assessments in the past, where they've only reached out for support maybe 6 months into their role, when they've started experiencing more of a crisis or they're really struggling in their work, because they're worried about how they're going to be treated when they first start. They're worried about how they'll be treated in the recruitment phases. It's only later they talk about it. By that point, you know, they're already experiencing a lot of challenges in their role. They might be experiencing a lot of mental health challenges. You know, they can be really getting into a real crisis situation. It's going to be harder to come back from. So the more we can do to proactively support people, the better for everyone. And can affect employee well-being in a number of ways. I put together some ideas about from what I've seen. So you think about if people don't feel safe to talk about or share or ask for help, they're masking those differences. They're working the way that's against the kind of their way of working. They're trying to fit in, but that can lead to kind of that fatigue and stress, often taking that home with them as well. Kind of, I've heard people saying they really get through the day and really kind of feel exhausted at the end of the day. It leads to that burnout, which then feeds into the next day as well, their productivity. If there is kind of rigid systems and lack of support, people can feel really kind of helpless and feel that kind of lack of autonomy as well. Loneliness and isolation, for different reasons. You know, people can feel on their own if they are neurodivergent and there's lack of support or kind of resources there. If there's not someone they can talk to, there is also a consequence of poor well-being. We often talk about in some of our mental health webinars as well. You know, that link to isolation, something we might do as a sign of poor well-being. Social anxiety as well. If people are communicating differently, they might struggle in certain settings. If that isn't taken into account, people might struggle to manage that. Managing change can be difficult for us all. Please do add your thoughts as well to going through this. What else would you add to this? Kind of what challenges have you seen to employee well-being linked with neurodiversity? Managing change, yeah, as I said, difficult for a lot of us. But for some people, can also be really, really difficult. They might really prefer a routine, and when that's broken, it can cause a lot of anxiety. And sensory sensitivities is a big one. A few people mentioned in the chat the idea of the kind of the built environment, the lighting, the noise. So you often see that linked with autism, where people can experience kind of heightened sensitivities to sensory inputs in their environment. So if you think about your office environment you're in now, or even the journey into work you had to take, the lighting, the noise. It could be the flicker rate of an office light. It could be the noise of an air conditioning. It could be the acoustics of a room. I know people working in big open plan offices can be really overwhelming. All that builds up can be quite exhausting for people to deal with. So even in your office spaces, that can be something to think about and ask people, is there anything that's quite overwhelming? Someone mentioned in the chat kind of demotivation. Yeah, so if you feel like not being supported, that demotivation afterwards, you feel a bit, probably maybe linked into that helplessness side as well. Someone's mentioned in the chat, I have had to take time off sick more in recent years due to burnout, overworking, isolation, feeling that no one understands my struggles and my own ability to articulate them because of the fear of me being perceived as bad at my job. I've now sought a private ADHD assessment as I can't go on with the struggles for the sake of my mental health. Yeah, no, thank you very much for sharing. Really kind of highlights what we're talking about here. You know, the challenges of feeling like no one understands your struggles. You don't know if you've got anyone you can talk to. Your kind of, I guess, the awareness of those differences as well. Maybe where that diagnosis or the assessment can be quite helpful. I hear a lot of people saying when they get those assessments, they not just for the official bit of paper, but just that feeling of like they understand themselves. That feels like a weight's been lifted. So that can sometimes be really positive for that. But yeah, linked to that kind of, you know, unable to ask for that support, not knowing where to go, then you're feeling isolated. It can be, yeah, lead to that overworking, taking longer to get things done. Takes a lot more energy out of you. I hear it all the time, you know, people, you know, a lot of energy it takes to really focus in different environments or work to the schedule you've been given. You just have to work longer to get things done. That kind of leads to presenteeism, then burnout as well. Yeah, absolutely. And you see a lot of people have shared their love for that as well. So thank you for sharing. That probably, I'm sure there's a few people who have experienced similar there as well. So thank you for that. I'll just quickly share some of these stats as well that we shared in our neurodiversity mental health webinar, just showing the kind of the stats on it as well, not just about what we're predicting might come up. But yeah, you see that those higher rates of stress, anxiety, depression with those of dyslexia, with ADHD. So 20 to 50% of adults with ADHD have major depressive disorder or dysthymia, if I can pronounce that. And about 50% of individuals with ADHD have some type of anxiety disorder. Also, 80% of autistic adults experience mental health issues during their lives, and the National Autistic Society found that 7% of autistic people fell into the severe anxiety category. So you think about all that we spoke about there, you know, it's not that those two are the same. It's usually due to the environment people are in, and this individual who shared their experience in the chat as well, it perfectly highlights that as well. No, thank you for sharing. So what are the benefits of neuro-inclusive workplaces? We've already spoken about a few of these. So talking about less about the challenges that we see and why it's important from a well-being perspective, but also what it brings to your organization as well. So there's the reason why you should be doing it anyway, but also the value of why it's worth engaging with. We talk about a lot about the neurodiversity strengths. So I think it's always great to highlight the value added there. So bringing back to that picture, I always put in there with the different brains, but also different skills. We talk about this a lot in our sessions and different skill sets people bring. That creativity, innovation, we often associate with maybe dyslexia and ADHD. Rapport building as well. The amount of people I've seen with dyslexia diagnosis who are in client-facing roles because their ability to work with people, verbal communication, be able to come up with different solutions, that creativity. Strategic thinking as well, hyper focus we see with ADHD, so the flip side of maybe the challenges of the focus. Be able to work well under pressure, hyper focus in certain settings, especially when kind of it's a particular topic they're really interested in. Lots of skills seen with an autism diagnosis, that analytical skills, attention to detail, pattern recognition, process driven. There's a lot of organizations now building those autism and work programs to really tap into those skill sets. Someone's mentioned in the chat, so are you able to ask to work from home when suffering from burnout? Yes, I think if you've got that business case for why it's helpful, I think it's definitely useful. I think some of those challenges we mentioned before, if those are challenges that you're experiencing when you go into the workplace, are you going to be able to be more productive on being at home? Give you time to recover. I think it's definitely something worth suggesting. Someone shared in the chat sort of what that story you mentioned before has resonated with them. So sometimes the workplace seems like a scary place to be in. At my time of life, I should not still feel that I have to mask my feelings, my dyslexia, mixed with things that old women have to go through. Yeah, I think I've seen some sessions before as well, linking, on a side note, linking neurodiversity with menopause and the challenges it leads to cognitively as well. I think it's something to really highlighted. I think especially when people have their coping mechanisms for how they work in the workplace, if they are neurodivergent, when that happens, I think that could be a really useful session as well. So thank you for sharing that. Linking to what people have mentioned before, kind of linked to, it's not just great for neurodivergent people, it's good for neurotypical. So looking at people feeling more supported, you're creating a more psychologically safe environment. If people are being supported, being listened to, you're adapting to different needs, you're creating a better team morale and trust amongst all the team. It's going to build stronger relationships. And hopefully, we're talking about all that, it's going to lead to stronger productivity and output as well. So there's a few stats here from a few sources where they've tried to measure their neurodiversity programs and what the impact it's had. So if anyone has heard of any others, please feel free to share. I'll read through these. So Hewlett Packard Enterprise, HP, have created a neurodiversity program called the Dandelion Program. It's aiming to recruit and train employees with autism for roles in software testing, analytics, cybersecurity. So it's been successful, and they are aiming to roll out the program globally. So over the past 2 years, so the HP's programs has placed more than 30 participants in the software testing roles in the Australia's Department of Human Services. And they found that the organization's neurodiversity testing teams are 30% more productive than the other teams, which is impressive. Ernst & Young established, so EY have established 23 neurodiversity centre of excellences across the world, which are customised to supporting workers with autism, dyslexia, ADHD, other cognitive differences. So focusing on innovation, analytics, cybersecurity, AI, obviously massive at the moment, blockchain, other areas, really emerging markets. And they found that those teams were 1.2 to 1.4 times more productive. You see better quality and timeliness, of output among those team members. They also found neurodivergent employees had a 92% retention rate in organizations that actively supported neuro-inclusion. So again, it's that return on investment as well. Get that productivity, but also that retention is also always more expensive to replace staff than it is to retain them. So it's always that return on investment is there. Lastly, I can see a lot of people sharing lots of really useful stories in the chat, so thank you. I'll come back to them as we go through. JP Morgan Chase here is also a financial service company. They created an autism at work program looking to recruit, train, hire people with autism for technology-related roles. And they saw a 90 to 140% productivity increase from their autism at work initiative compared to neurotypical teams. That was with people who've been in the role for much longer as well. So it just shows that when you do invest, it's not saying that everyone who's neurodivergent is going to be hyper productive, not to put that pressure on people, but it just shows if you as an employer really invest in creating a flexible environment and adapting to different ways of working, you can really see that return on investment. Last point here is that organizational success. We spoke about productivity. Reputation, So obviously you're building better morale in the team, it's more trust, it's better reputation internally, but also externally. So you can see that higher retention internally. But from a recruitment standpoint, you're attracting the best talent. So think of all those skills we associated with neurodiversity. People identify as being neurodivergent, um, and they're looking for a start in a new role. I always mention this when I'm doing neuro-inclusive recruitment sessions. What's the first thing you're going to do if you're searching for a new role? You might research the organization as well. So if you've got that reputation for being neuro-inclusive, you're going to encourage them to apply in the first instance. You never know at the moment if you're not having that neuro-inclusivity in the organization and shared, you may be putting people off from applying for the role in the first place. They might be people who might be bring a lot of value to your teams. So helps you bring in the best talent, which is really valuable. So a question for you now, and I'll leave this here. I'll start reading through some of your stories as well. Um, I've got a few thoughts on this, which I'll share in a second. So what barriers might a neurodivergent candidate or employee face in the workplace? So thinking about those who are already in the organisation, but also people accessing the organisation. Um, have a look if anyone else, any other points in the chat. I'll keep reading through your thoughts. Please do share what the barriers you've seen or what the barriers might be at the moment. Someone mentioned here, I am almost 55 and it is feeling impossible to keep masking. Yeah, it can be really, especially if you've been there for a long time, it can be really challenging. I need transparency, acceptance, open communication, and a warm and supportive workplace. I'm also very open and often say too much about myself and then feel vulnerable. Yeah, I can sometimes, yeah, a symptom of ADHD is kind of maybe oversharing or being open. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's a good thing to be open. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of employers there, I hope people are reading this stories here. I think it's so valuable to listen to. There's people there who are struggling to mask or feeling they have to act a certain way. And all they want is that being at that ability to be transparent, accepted, and have that open communication, feel that support from their employer. So even those who are employers here, if you're thinking, I don't hear this at all, why are you not hearing that? Are they masking like some of these individuals are saying here as well? Just going to share some of the responses to this question here. So ignorance, lack of knowledge, definitely a big one. Prejudice, that stigma around, yeah, neurodiversity, absolutely. Lack of understanding, bias, interview styles, yeah. I always think about this with interviews, what we interviewing for, making sure you're really testing the skills you want for the role. Often how people interview is one of the biggest barriers people who are neurodivergent face. They say, no, I know I can do this role, but I struggle with kind of saying that in the interview or how I communicate in those settings. Being treated differently to others, yeah. Preference for very indirect communication, or sometimes people have preferences for very direct communication. So sometimes can be misconstrued as I think someone mentioned in the chat earlier, as becoming across as rude in their communication. Sometimes some people are more direct, some people find that challenging. Sometimes people are more indirect. Lack of understanding seems to be a big one, keeps coming up. So I'll share my points here as well, actually, as we're going through. So yeah, lack of awareness is a big one for me. That kind of links to that stigma around diagnosis. Absolutely, it could be just organizationally, but also just managers. Something I've done a lot of work on in the past, that kind of neuro-inclusive management. How can we as managers support our teams? We're managers are often the people who make the biggest difference to our colleagues, our teams, kind of experience of work. So that could be a really good starting point in building that neuro-inclusivity. Lack of support resources, or is it built into the policies and processes? Sometimes it might just be because you have a nice manager who looks after you in that way, you get that support. If you change teams or change role or change manager, that can completely change. Is it a uniform approach? So lack of support resources, no clear adjustment process. People mention the need for adjustments, whether it be in recruitment or talent management. Rigidity I put here, so rigid ways of working, I think is a massive challenge. How do we build flexibility into our workspace to allow different ways of working? It's really important. that can include kind of the built environment, can include communication styles. Just going back to the chat here, people have shared kind of expectations for people to act act neurotypical, absolutely. Colleagues feeling they are not doing their fair share due to different ways of working. Yeah, kind of people not understanding why people work in a different way. As the same with adjustments, I think when that's not clearly communicated, I think people can feel they can't give someone an adjustment because they're worried about how the rest of the team will react to it if they're given something different to them. So this comes back to the idea, that if we can build in that idea of I'm going to adapt my style to each member of my team, that equity over equality. Lack of support, awareness, resources, we mentioned there in the chat as well. Lack of clear information, too much assumptions. Yeah, so I've definitely heard that doing workplace needs assessments. Classic story I've heard is someone coming to their manager and saying, oh, I actually am dyslexic, I need a few adjustments. And the manager's just said, oh, I know what that means. It means you need this adjustment, and this adjustment. And they've not really given them a space to listen. So like I said right at the start, it's really important to try and keep an open mind. Don't assume you know what someone needs. Lack of opportunity to ask clarifying questions, limited detail, context given to instructions. Yes, kind of how we communicate, communication styles, understanding around that is important. Being unsure what things are available. Yeah, the amount of times I've seen, people having really good policies and adjustments there, or external resources they can use, but it's not communicated. Whether it be to colleagues, employees, or managers, it's such an easy step to fill in. Networking type events being a complete anathema to many autistic people. Yeah, so understanding networking events aren't for everyone. They can be quite exhausting and stressful to a lot of people as well. So bearing that in mind, how do we set those up? I've been to some events, especially around neurodiversity, where they've come up with different ways of setting up events, maybe having separate side rooms to have separate smaller discussions, to take it away from the overwhelming nature of a larger room. Having discussion points, more talks, so creating different environments where people can share their thoughts. Ambiguous language, yes, come back to communication. It's a lot around neuro-inclusive communication we could be talking about as well. People judging quickly if new joiners don't appear very sociable. Yeah, something I've heard people saying, they're hiring people based on how bubbly they are in interviews and stuff like that. What we're judging people on is a really key thing to think about. Noisy offices, come back to the idea of built environment, your sensory sensitivities. So yeah, that lack of noise cancelling headphones, space for meetings. Yeah, kind of, especially when people have had to come back to the office post-COVID. That's been very anxiety provoking for a few reasons. You can imagine that kind of change in uncertainty, changes to moving to a new environment, getting used to that new environment, getting used to the built environment itself, and there's kind of your senses and all that. It's very challenging. Yeah, so I've mentioned here, some people do not disclose mask their neurodiversity because they are worried that their employer will say they will have to look at capability issues. Yeah, exactly. That linking to it's being perceived as not as able. Yeah, so it's something I've spoken about in a previous webinar to talk about workplace preferences and that how managers can approach that, hopefully to create that safe environment for people. But something will be coming up later in the year. But if you want more information on that, please do reach out. I'll keep going, just conscious of time. Please do keep sharing. It's so nice to see everyone sharing their thoughts and seeing that resonate with a lot of people as well. So thank you for sharing that. Please do keep sharing your thoughts. So what can you do to create neuro-inclusivity and psychological safety? So what are you doing already? I've got some few thoughts, but I won't jump straight into it just yet. What are your experiences? What have you found helpful? It'd be good to hear from a manager or an employer perspective, what you found helpful to put in place, but also maybe if anyone's here is neurodivergent, it'd be good to hear kind of what you found helpful. Could be great. Yeah, your experience is always really valuable. So someone mentioned having quiet rooms to give people space should they need it. Absolutely. So yeah, we find people who aren't necessarily diagnosed with as we said, that spectrum of neurodiversity. You don't have to have a particular diagnosis. People might still find it helpful to get that time to recharge. Promote an environment that accepts differences. So yeah, how you promote that is so valuable. Very general, people accepting that others are different in any aspects increases the chance of people being okay with of being okay with other differences. Absolutely. So, and how you share that is so important. I always think that as a manager as well, it's really valuable because it's very easy to sit and wait to say you're available to talk, but proactively kind of sharing, what you can talk about and what's available can be really helpful. Managing their timetable in a way that it makes sense, asking for additional working from home days when tiredness kicks in. Yeah, giving people that flexibility. I think we live in depending on your roles and your industries, we have varying degrees of being able to have flexible working, be able to work from home, be able to work from an office. We have where possible, how can we build that in to support people? The end result is, to help people be as productive as possible. So how do we, thinking back to that idea of equity again, how do we help people be their best selves? Accepting, supportive, acceptance with a lot of people saying acceptance. Yeah, so maybe around awareness is probably one of the key things there. I found splitting tasks with other neurodivergent people who have different strengths to me is helpful for both of us. Absolutely. Something we've seen, I've definitely seen in some of my previous workspaces where, we have varying, differences. And, it means we can split the work depending on where people really excel. It helps that us all benefit from it as a team. So if you're working in a team with a few people who are neurodivergent, how do you utilize them to get the best out of them? It's a great idea. Exploring adjustments without the need for a formal diagnosis. Absolutely. I think that's, if anyone here is unsure about that, if there's anything to take away from today, definitely just, we talk about neurodiversity, but as I said, we're really talking about people management. So how do we just build in that ability to adjust to these different needs? And you don't need to have a diagnosis for that. It's just about listening to what individuals need and how to get the best out of them. Someone's mentioned I do a lot of recruitment, and a candidate asked me for the questions beforehand. I'm 100% in support of this and provide all candidates questions beforehand. Totally agree. I think I'm sure you've heard that pushback a lot. The person who shared that in the chat where people say, "Oh, I'm not sure if that's okay, or it might give some people an unfair advantage." I don't see what advantage it gives really. I think that we're giving everyone an opportunity to answer the question as accurately as possible. I know I can speak for myself. I've walked out of interviews sometimes and thought, oh, I could have said this, I could have said that. I haven't demonstrated my best self for this role. So I've done myself a disservice. The organisation doesn't get the best information to hire the best person. Not necessarily saying I'm the best person for the role I was looking at, but yeah, definitely would have helped them make a better decision. So it helps you make a better decision, giving everyone just interview questions beforehand. If you haven't, all you're doing is testing, who can respond better in the moment. And I think it depends on the situation as well. I've seen some industries where they say, well, this is a skill we're testing for the role. We want to see how you act in a certain moment under pressure. So I can understand that argument as well, but it depends entirely on the role. If it's not for a role where that's not needed, why bother? Just give them the questions beforehand. So I've mentioned I can no longer work or function in an office environment. I don't even go outside much at all as I can't handle dealing with people. Anxiety cripples me and I'm left physically and mentally exhausted. I've been told I need to go back to the office and I just can't. Yes, I can imagine that's really anxiety provoking. And you can see when it's that one size fits all, you can see for some people, it's put in place because some people enjoy being in the office. Whereas others, it can be really crippling. It's a great word you've used there, crippling, that exhaustion. So something to really bear in mind, how do we make this palatable for everyone? Not everyone's going to enjoy it as much as some people do. Not everyone's been yearning to go back to the office. So I think that building that in is and understanding that's really important. I'll share my thoughts while I'm going, just conscious of time. So yeah, thinking about strategy and policy. I think I've mentioned before the value of kind of formalizing it and having that assurance from a neurodivergent perspective that it's what's expected. Senior accountability, having clear support options and communicating it. Amplification Role modeling is so valuable. Idea of, sharing the value of neurodiversity. A few of you mentioned that already. Role modeling as well. So, people sharing lived experience, I think is so valuable, whether it be across different roles or different parts of your organization, different seniorities. Helps build that psychological safety. It's okay. You can see the support's been used and they found it helpful. I think that's great. A lot of you mentioned awareness in the chat. Yeah, training for leaders and employees is such an important first step. How do we build that awareness of neurodiversity, the value it adds, get people talking about it in a positive way, whether it be general, but also managers who make the biggest impact. Communication, yeah, I mentioned before, we can have all these right good things, but if we don't communicate it, it's not helpful. ERGs, that's employee led resource groups. I think they're a really useful step as well. Gives people a voice, gives people a sense of, they're not alone. Helps avoid that, get away from that isolation. So if you haven't got one, I think setting up a neurodiversity resource group is quite helpful. Just gives people a space to share what they found helpful, give people a space to talk to each other and have that support network for one another. Also useful to get feedback on anything you've rolled out, which is a useful way of getting some valuable feedback. Yeah, some good points in here as well. I'll go through this as we're going. So making adjustments without making someone feel like a burden. Yeah, absolutely. Don't feel like you're kind of really dragging your feet over it. It's not changing things for neurodiverse people, but amending the working culture to suit everyone. Absolutely. It's about how do you create, an inclusive, flexible working culture. Exactly. So, like I said before, you can almost remove the word neurodiversity out of that. Just think about how do we create a flexible environment for everyone? What's your way of working? How do we make this inclusive? Manager letting me know to feel free to go on walks as and when needed. It's helpful knowing that if I need it to help with focus, it won't be seen as avoiding work, but something to help me work better. Absolutely. So having that understanding, some people might, going for a walk helps get the ideas flowing. I've heard something similar with, you might have seen in the past those like no headphone policies in the workspaces. They think people are just listening to music or not working as well. Whereas some people might find that really helpful to block out all that background noise of the office environment. They might be listening to white noise to help them focus. So again, it's just giving people those tools to be as productive as possible. So point having a legal requirement to make neurodiverse training compulsory. So maybe, yeah, something can build into the strategy policy, as part of maybe the manager role or part of the kind of compulsory e-learning. Maybe that's a good idea. Yeah, kind of having that something that everyone has to go through is not an option. I think definitely from a manager perspective, you're learning how different people work. It's like a teacher learning different learning styles. You're just learning how different people work and how to get the best out of people. So it really it's just helpful for their people management. It should be built into their training anyway. Letting people know they are appreciated and trusted to do their job well. Yeah, takes the pressure off. If they want to suggest adjustments, absolutely. Thank you everyone for sharing what they found helpful. I'm going to just finish up some of the slides. So it's time for questions as well. Just so you're aware what's available at CiC. As always, we have our Ellie platform, which shares a lot of information on different webinar series and podcasts and different articles on neurodiversity. So have a look there if you've got access. You've got a webinar program that we're in right now, so we'll have those constantly going on. But if you want anything specific for your teams, if you think you might learn something more in depth on a particular topic or neurotype or adjustments or recruitment, talent management, please do reach out, because something we can look at in terms of creating training programs. And similarly with consultative programs, it's something we can look at how we're building this neuro-inclusive culture, thinking about all those things we mentioned on the last slide. How do we implement that and test it, measure it, the impact? Something that if you want any advice on, please do reach out. It's a little screenshot of what that Ellie wellbeing platform looks like. So you can see different panels of lots of resources there. So if you're interested, do reach out to your relationship manager. They'll be able to provide some more information there. I'm going to leave this personal action plan available, so you can kind of think about what you're going to do differently over the next week or so. While we're answering questions, I'm just going to open up our poll, just looking at again just how likely you are to recommend our future neurodiversity webinars to your colleagues. So 5 being very likely, and 1 being very unlikely. So please do share your feedback; it's always very valuable. But I'll open up to questions. I'll look at the chat as well, see if there's anything that has come up. But if you need to jump off, please feel free to. If you've got any questions you'd rather ask privately, please do reach out via email. I was happy to help. No, if anyone has to leave, no worries, you're very welcome. Look in the Q&A as well, see if there's anything. Someone's mentioned via email. I will. I can share the email again to the attendees, but we'll be reaching out with the information for the next webinar soon anyway. So then you'll have my email from there. So feel free to, if you've got any questions, please do reach out. Yeah, someone mentioned in the chat and all the attendees for their advice, how great it is. Thank you, as always. I'm always really grateful for everyone sharing their thoughts. Obviously, it's very difficult to share something personal to you. So please do. No, sorry. Thank you for sharing, because it helps, other people feel like they're not alone, and it really brings some of this information to light. So thank you. Doesn't look like we have any. Oh, we might have one question. Sorry, just onto the Q&A. I have a feeling 2 colleagues are neurodiverse, but neither have openly said so. How can I go about helping them and me get the most out of themselves? Yeah, good question. So how do you conduct that psychological safety, doesn't it? So thinking about, I guess, first of all, the first thing is don't feel like you have to diagnose anyone, as we said, don't feel like you have to suggest they go for a diagnosis. I think very much just comes down to working styles, and you can just talk to them about, is there anything I can do to help with focus, or you can make an observation. I can see you maybe struggle with communicating in these settings, or you find these challenging, or you could ask them, is there anything that you find particularly challenging with our ways of working now? Maybe make some suggestions, what adjustments are available, so they know what's there. I think that's because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, is you're just making adjustments based on what they find their way of working is. A diagnosis or not is sometimes helpful, but it's not really relevant to what the adjustments you're going to put in place. So making it just a general discussion about their ways of working and how you can help them. Some suggestions for adjustments as well to share what's available might encourage them to feel like, okay, actually, I might engage with that. You can also share what you do, if you've done anything you've done that to help kind of you with your ways of working, to help them feel like it's not just them being singled out, it's something you're doing for everyone. Maybe having that adjustment conversation with everyone as well, just so it's not feeling like they're being singled out. That's good to hear at the end. The comments were so interesting. I do not feel quite so isolating now. So yeah, actually, I think it's exactly the point. It's helpful just to, it's really helpful just to, you sharing that helps to other people feel empowered. So thank you, everyone.